Hello, this is a presentation about research and how to apply library research skills during the research process. This presentation is going to be over the topic of how technology changes us, or answering the question of how is technology changing us. This demonstration is for an English 111 class, but this can be applied to any type of research done at Ivy Tech using Ivy Tech academic databases. So welcome to this talk. So to start, when we're discussing this topic, we always want to go over some of the learning objectives and the priorities that we have during the presentation. And so the learning objectives we have for this would be that anyone viewing it will be able to find information from appropriate sources, identify databases and resources relevant to their research project, and to choose keywords that represent a research topic and use keywords to find useful information sources. On the agenda today is to demonstrate how to navigate the Ivy Tech Indie Library site for the following information: library access, academic tutoring, and database searching, as well as research source discovery. So when somebody is doing a research topic, a lot of times, or they're starting to think about how to write about a research topic, particularly in English 111, there will be a number of readings that a teacher has given the class throughout the 8 weeks, or throughout maybe that portion of the 8 weeks, that has some type of theme. One of the themes that comes up quite a bit is the one that ties to technology and how it is impacting us in many different ways. And it's oftentimes personal. It's also based off of lived experiences, ways that it is affecting our children, ways we're seeing it show up in our communities. And so the question of how technology changes us is something that we're going to look at today because it is relatable. And so for this example, for this demonstration today, we're going to be talking about technology, and we're going to be approaching this presentation or this research as if we were students in a class where the teacher has been looking at a number of readings and been having discussions and lessons tied to tech. And so a lot of times when students are starting this process, they are, one of the first obstacles is the brainstorming process, and taking a big concept such as technology, or the idea or the question of how is it changing us, and saying, how can I talk about this huge subject and narrow it down to something that will result in a 5 to 12 page paper, depending on my teacher's parameters. And so we start with this. We start with the question, we start with a theme that has been given to us by our teacher. And at this point, this is where we dip into our first form of research. And so when we are looking for research, or we are looking to, or when our goal is to look at the library site to find sources or support for our paper, we always start with MyIvy. We start with MyIvy until we eventually go and bookmark this. But finding the library site can be done in a couple of ways. You can go to the See All button, where all of your apps are arranged alphabetically. You can also go to this top left-hand corner search box and type in library. If you type in library, you'll see library with nothing beside it, and then library that says statewide. If you click the one that says nothing beside it, just library, you will come to the Ivy Tech Community College's library site for Indianapolis specifically. Now, we like to use the Indianapolis specific database, especially when we are talking to Indianapolis-based students, because it contains so much good information. We have our hours. We also can let you know where we are located. We have maps here. We have ways that you can connect with a librarian or other tutors that are available at the library. We have campus tutors in writing, math, science, and IT. We also have ways that you can connect with librarians through library research tutoring. We have study rooms that you are welcome to check out for yourself or for a collaboration. And then as you scroll down, we highlight workshops that are happening on the campus. Virtually, we have our contact information at the bottom. And then when we start looking for research, we always go to A to Z resources, or we go to Start with Discover. So today what we're going to do, going back to that presentation, going back to how technology changes us, when we're presented with a big idea and we need to make it smaller, a lot of times one of the first places we're going to go is to go to a database called Opposing Viewpoints. Opposing Viewpoints is featured right here underneath featured databases because it is so popular. And a lot of people use this, not just for English 111, but anytime they're trying to just get those creative juices flowing and maybe know all the sides of a topic that they are required to discuss. So we could also access this by clicking on this A to Z resources. A to Z resources will take us to all 134 databases that we have in our collection. And we could quickly get to Opposing Viewpoints by clicking on O for all the O's, so Opposing Viewpoints, if that's what we wanted. We could also go over to the types here where it has argumentative research and click here, filter databases, and we would find 3 different databases that are tied to argumentative research, and this is also where you could find Opposing Viewpoints. So when we're looking at Opposing Viewpoints, almost immediately one can tell that it is filled with information. And there are a couple of ways to research this database. For starters, if you are interested in looking at all the topics that are labeled as being somewhat controversial, some maybe something that deals with sensitive topics, we actually have 492 topics listed here. If you clicked on this tab, you would see all of them listed here, and they are very, they're all over the place. We have things about peer pressure, the pharmaceutical industry, endangered species, factory farming, fake news, feminism, reality television, free trade, freedom of assembly. We could go through this, but all of these are alphabetized. Another way that we could go through this would be to look at the issues as they're kind of clumped together in terms of, like the common thread that they have. So if we wanted to look up things about laws and politics, we have a few listed here: health and medicine, society and culture. Today, I'm interested in this category, science, technology, and ethics. And if I clicked into this, I would find 119 different topics I might consider for my research. I've decided in this model that I am interested in artificial intelligence. It is the technology that a lot of people are speaking to right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here. All of these are alphabetized, as I mentioned. We see some updated things, more information, updated. And since I know I want to look at artificial intelligence, I see it listed here as artificial intelligence. I also see artificial intelligence and mental health. So I could click on either one of these if I wanted and get right into the topic. And then the final way that I could get into my topic is by going up to the search box and typing in artificial. I do have to spell it correctly. It doesn't fix it for me. Oops, artificial. And I have the choice between artificial intelligence and mental health. So I have some options. If I change my mind, I can always go back, But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'll go ahead and talk about artificial intelligence and mental health. And so whatever topic that I choose, there's always going to be something here about the topic called read overview. And I suggest that everybody look at this, especially when you're in that exploratory stage. We also have related topics that you could look at. So especially if you're still thinking about, maybe you're interested in artificial intelligence, but you don't know enough and you might want to branch out or maybe add to it. You can see that they have other topics you could also check into. We have medical technology, we have mental disorders, we have mental health. All of these will open up into their own topics if we choose technology and society, giving you something more broad. If you close down here, if you look down here, you'll see that we have different types of sources. We have academic journals, reference, news that we're going to be looking at more closely in a few minutes. And as we scroll down, you can see how they break down into different types of sources that you could click into. Now, to know more about your topic, say you're leaning more toward the artificial intelligence, mental health, you want to know more, I would suggest that you look at the Read Overview. The Read Overview is a wonderful introduction to any topic that you might be considering for your presentation or for your writing. And so what this is going to contain, if you're curious, I would say look at the article contents. This does work as a table of contents. And as you can see here, it discusses certain information. Technological models. So you can tell already that they're going to discuss different types of AI. We have documented and potential benefits. So they're going to look at some of the positive things that AI has done and most likely kind of lean more toward mental health because we're looking at artificial intelligence and mental health. So they're going to show ways that it's actually helped out the mental health industry. And then underneath it, it's going to talk about the risks and limitations. So then it's also going to discuss this area that has legitimately caused some concerns for people when they are learning about or they're knowing more about AI and they're seeing how it's impacting themselves and loved ones. So you could click on any of these at any time and it would show you, it would take you to the area of the article that you want to know more about. This is also going to show you some related subjects. So you are going to be doing keyword searching later. So here are some words just to start getting those creative juices flowing and also give you something to type later when you're looking at different parts of our library site to search. And then we go ahead and they have some articles here. And if you're looking for sources, this is a good place for it. So we absolutely do always encourage that you look at the Read Overview. It's going to give you dates, it's going to give you names, it's going to give you people, and this is going to help you better understand your topic. Other things we like about opposing viewpoints is that you can translate it to different languages. You can make the font smaller, you can make it larger. You can change the font if you want to. We do have an open dyslexic that kind of weights down the letters in a line so it's not swimming all over the screen. You can add color behind it. You can manipulate the spacing if that will help you. But these are all things that you can do to your document while you are reading it for better understanding. You can also listen to it. It can be read aloud to you as you are reading or listen to it as you are doing things in your home, you know, maybe multitasking, but also having this in the background or to reinforce what you're reading so you can listen to it extra intensely and see it from both your vision and from your sound or from the audio, the sound part. You can click here for citation information. Everyone is going to need going to have a references or a works cited page. So this is where you could go for the citation. You could send this to yourself, to Google, to Microsoft, or to your email. You can download this to your device. You can print it. This is where you can get a permanent link, which will allow you to work around the paywalls later if you copy and paste this somewhere that you can click on later. And this will allow you to annotate it. But one of the reasons why you should look at this, in addition to just knowing more about this background, is that it's important to familiarize yourself with these little tools that have been developed to make learning easier. Because a lot of times everybody has a learning style, and everybody does better when they get extra help. And so there are different types of educational technology that ensures that. So definitely look at this and definitely consider this as you're looking through your article, because these will come up again, as I'll soon demonstrate. So once you've looked at your article, and if you decide that you want to know more about it, you just go back to the original site where your information is stored and about that topic. And then you can scroll down and you can start looking for articles. And so say that you wanted to get something from an academic journal. A lot of times your instructors will tell you what types of sources that they want. A lot of times they'll also say, we really like peer reviewed. We want something from an academic journal. We want it academic. We want an academic database. All those things basically will point to academic journals if on this list. So if you wanted to look at those, you could click here. And those could take you to articles that have been peer reviewed by other experts who understand this topic, that will let you, that you should be able to trust. And a peer reviewed seal of approval is considered the gold standard in academics, because it's been scrutinized so closely by others to make sure that the research is understandable and trustable, and it is something that they feel comfortable spreading or giving to someone else to look at more, or for somebody to look at and to gain understanding of their topic. They're not going to be misled or be given something that hasn't been verified by people who would know. And so you could click onto any of these articles or into any of these articles. You can see it says peer reviewed next to all of these. So that's another reminder that you're looking at something academic. And if you want to look at this, you could go ahead and click in here. You would see that you'd be looking at an abstract. A lot of times an academic article will contain an abstract that will make things, you can see a shortened version of what the article is about. You can read through that. And if this is something that you like, then you can read it, you can download it, you can print it, you can cite it, you can do all the things that you want. But this would be considered a source that you might want to look at. If academic journals, if you've exhausted this list and you want to look at others, you could always listen to audio, a podcast, if your teacher allows it. That is a source. We have different types of news. We have infographics, different types of ways to show your understanding of whatever you want to know. So definitely consider this as a place to start, particularly if you are in that brainstorming phase. So let's go ahead and look at more of this. So once you have decided on your topic, a lot of times your teacher will say, we're all writing a paper that deals with this issue, such as technology. And so how technology changes us, your next step is to make that smaller. Take this big topic and make it smaller. So I have decided that I'm going to look at artificial intelligence and mental health. And so after I've decided what part of this big topic I want to know more about, the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to start asking it questions. And the reason why I'm going to start asking it questions is because I need to answer these questions in my paper. And so if I was being asked about, or if I was wondering or curious about this topic of AI, here are a couple of things that I could maybe consider, or questions I could ask it, such as, does addiction to AI technologies make problems like social isolation, detachment from reality, or poor face-to-face communication worse? Okay, that's a very good question. I am curious about the addictive qualities of AI, or at least in my student modeling. The next question I have is, what is the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? Okay, so now I want to look at this area of mental illness that sometimes can be tied to loneliness. I'm also in this case looking at a specific population, which is young people. And then finally, looking at this topic of addictive behaviors. So how do AI-related addictive behaviors like social media, gaming, binge watching affect mental illness in teens compared to adults? So in this case, I'm looking at different populations, but I'm also tying this to the addictive qualities of AI and thinking about that in terms of mental health. So I could come up with so many questions here. And a lot of times when I am in that stage of, before I do a lot of research, I have a ton of questions because I'm new to the topic in most cases. So I have to figure out what I want to know before I can do the research. And in fact, if you ever go to the librarians at the Indy campus to know more about the research options or to find sources, a lot of times we're going to say, well, what do you want to know about your topic? So once you ask all these questions, you do have to narrow this down. And so what I have here is something called the research question. And it is the second option that I went with. And I'm looking at this. What is the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? Okay, so that's the question that I want to answer today. What's the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? So if that's the question that I want to answer, then that is essentially setting me up for the next essential piece of research, which is the answer, which is also known as the thesis. So we work toward these in these little baby steps in terms of the big option that your teacher gives you. You break it down into something that is more specialized, something that you want to know about that big topic. And then once you start asking it questions, you narrow it down so you can then develop something called a thesis. A thesis is the response to the research question. So if my question is, what is the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? Then my thesis, my answer is AI addiction negatively impacts youth mental health by fostering social isolation and weakening face-to-face communication skills. That's what I'm saying. That's what I believe. And so if that is what I believe, then that is what I am going to be trying to prove in my paper using the sources that I find during my research. So the way this looks in terms of like an inverted triangle would be this. The topic the teacher gives us, how technology changes us, or they might ask, how is technology changing us? Or how is it impacting your job? Or how is it changing you? Next, you narrow it down into a smaller area tied to that bigger topic. So artificial intelligence and mental health is what you're going to be thinking about. Those are the key words. That's what you want to know tied to this question. Next, what is the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? So that's the question I'm asking about my topic. And then finally, we have this line of the thesis. AI addiction negatively impacts youth mental health by fostering social isolation and weakening face-to-face communication skills. That's my thesis. So once I have done all of this, the next step is to develop keywords. Now, the reason why this is important to the research process is that our next step is to start looking at the library site once again and be looking in certain areas to conduct keyword searching. In opposing viewpoints, we were clicking around the site, which is what we do a lot of times. We're on the computer. But another type of searching is called keyword searching. And so when we're doing keyword searching, this is when we're typing in words so we can make matches and hits throughout the internet to find what we're looking at. And in this case, we'll be looking or searching in academic databases. So going back to this template, or when we are looking at this presentation, if my thesis is about AI addiction and how it impacts health, mental health by social isolation, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be plucking words from this wording so I can have, or I can conduct keyword searching. So I have AI addiction. Different ways I could write AI addiction include AI with no period, AI with periods. Let's see this a little bit closer. Artificial intelligence completely written out. Chat GPT, looking at something that is a special brand or a special type of AI. AI addiction with no quotes, AI addiction with quotes. All of these are different ways of looking at just this first part of my thesis. But these are words that I am coming up with and I'm thinking about and I'm searching for so I can keep on with the search. I have mental illness. I have mental health. I have types of mental illnesses like anxiety, depression, loneliness. Some of those are in my thesis. Some of those are ones that I naturally have just thought of. Because once you start doing this brainstorming session, a lot of times things will just be coming out of your pen or typing on the computer and you'll say, oh yeah, I know this word, or oh yeah, this is what this thing makes me think of when I think of this. So all of those things are going on. And so once you've developed your keywords, your next step is to go into this site and type in a couple. So I'm going to be looking up AI addiction and mental health. That's going to be my first search. And in fact, this is going to be one of 4 searches that I'm going to be demoing throughout this presentation. So once we have this keyword development, that can take, anywhere from 5 minutes, 30 minutes, something you go back to over a course of a day or two. Once you have your keywords developed, your next step is to start thinking about the keyword search. So what I'm going to be doing for the rest of this presentation is I'm going to show you how different types of words will be typed in different databases within the Ivy Tech Library site, so you can see how different types of words and different filters and different databases can make a huge impact on the types of sources that you are searching for. And so we'll be doing it with 2 types of words, 2 concepts. The next one, we will be looking at words that are similar. So using filters to with different types of words, different ways of doing that keyword strategy. We'll be looking in multidisciplinary databases, and then we'll also be looking at subject-specific databases. All of these things I'll soon be demonstrating. And so our first one, we are going to be looking at this, at AI addiction and mental health, and we are going to be doing that in Start with Discover. Start with Discover is an option that some of you might take if you want to look at all 134 databases at once. You do have the option of clicking into these one by one, just as we demonstrated with opposing viewpoints. But you can also do this all at once. And this will also allow you to look at our books, our ebooks, and our resources that you may not have considered. So we'll go ahead and type in AI addiction and mental health underneath Start with Discover on our library site here at Indianapolis. I'm going to go ahead and click search. And when I click search, you can see that I have 52,000 results, which is quite a bit, as you can tell. And so when we're looking at these results, a lot of times it makes best sense to actually kind of just scroll through these and put in some preliminary filters. So some of these preliminary filters that I always suggest just right off the bat, especially if your teacher has recommended that you or has insisted that you do something academic or peer reviewed, is that you go ahead and you add that filter, which can be found here on the right. And once you do that, you can see that that takes that 52,000 to 33,000. 33,000 is quite nice compared to 55,000, simply because it eliminates every single option that you may not necessarily need because your instructor has told you that they don't want you to use it. Another thing that you might consider in terms of looking at this would be to put in some dates. So the publication date makes a huge difference because the publications of something, maybe 10 years old, 50 years old, while it's interesting, while it can give some context, it may not be the best thing if you want to know what's happening right now. Now, we've been talking about AI for the last couple of years, like everybody has. However, we also know that AI has been talked about by the experts, by the industry for over 50 years. And so we want to tighten up our discussion here. And so I'm going to type in a publication date of 2021 to 2026. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to make sure that the topics that I'm looking at in terms of, or the sources that I'm looking at, are some of the ones that have most recently been published. And so we'll go ahead and click include. And when I click include, you can see that it takes away nearly another 20,000. So now we're looking at articles that are definitely peer reviewed. And we can also see that they've all been published in the last 5 years, or more like 4.5. Now, once we have started looking at our options, there's no way that you're ever going to have enough time to look at 17,000. And you shouldn't expect to, you shouldn't feel pressure to. A lot of times we start just looking at some of these titles. And so we see the impact of Instagram on mental health and well-being of Indian youth, artificial intelligence intervention in detecting distress. Okay, so questions you're asking yourself. Okay, are my keywords, where are they showing up? Are they in the title? Where am I seeing mental health and artificial intelligence? What are they talking about? It looks like they're looking at a specific group of youth. Would that be beneficial to you? Is that what you're looking at? Think about what they're saying or what they're implying in terms of the population that they're researching. Do you want to know about Instagram specifically, or are you thinking about something more general? Either way, these are questions that you're asking yourself as you're looking and you're slowly scrolling through your options. You're going to be looking at the titles. You're going to see some that are in languages that you may or may not understand. You are just scrolling all types of things. Now, once you have scrolled down here a bit, at a certain point, you are going to have to start, narrowing it down and looking at some things. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at this digital mental health tools and AI therapy chatbots, a balanced approach to regulation. If I am curious about a topic, I could start off by clicking here on the actual title itself. Once I look at this title itself, it's going to provide me an abstract. An abstract is very helpful because it's going to be a shortened version of the research. So I am able to at least maybe just know a little bit more and spend maybe 5 minutes trying to think about whether this is something I want to consider as a full-on source, where I might be spending, a decent amount of time reading the full article. If I do want to read the full article, I can check on full text. And once I click on check for full text, it's going to bring me to one step closer to my article. And so here I can see a few things. One, I see this access options. When I access options, I have the PDF and an online full text for to view the document. If I click on PDF, it's going to show me the article. I can see it's 16 pages long. This is something that I could print if I wanted. This is something I could also download. And the way to do that is I could click here to download. I could click on the share button that will allow me to create a link so I can see this later. I could also go to this little cite button. This cite button will allow me to find my citations. So I could always go to APA. I could also go to MLA, which I could copy and paste to my references or works cited page. Another thing I like about this is that I could listen to this. So I could listen to this at any point, and I could even adjust the playback speed, which is very, very nice. Now, if I choose to go with the online full text instead, I'm going to see something similar, but a little bit different. What's similar is you're going to see the same words. What's different is the format or the layout. So you can see that this is what it looks like now. We don't have the page numbers. We don't have that specialized heading. We still have these different options in terms of saving. But what's different here is we have a globe. And so when you go with the online full text and you click it here, you can choose a language that maybe is more understandable for you. Say you are a Spanish speaker, or that is what you understand best. Then if that is the case, then by clicking on a different language, you can actually change it and translate it almost instantaneously. I think it took less than 5 seconds for this to go from English to Spanish. Now, the only thing to keep in mind is that you cannot listen to it in Spanish, but you are able to at least read it in Spanish, and you could always at any point change it back to English and listen to it. But those are two options in terms of accessing the document. You can see here, you can also download it from here. Another thing I really love is that you can click on a couple of buttons that will help you find other articles. And this is really nice, especially if you have found a really good article in that initial search. If you go to the reference, well, first of all, we'll go to the cited by 8. When you're cited by 8, what that means, this would be cited by 1, it could say cited by 15, it could be cited by 100. But what that means is that other people who have been doing research on this topic have come to this article and have said, hey, I like what it says, and I'm going to reference it in my research. And the reason why that is so important is that gives this article more credibility. It shows that in just the few months that it's been published since here in 2026, that people are already looking at it and using it in their articles, and they're getting published. That's a good sign for you that you're looking at something that is trustworthy. Another thing to consider is looking at the references. The references are a wonderful place to find sources because the author or authors of that article mean they have gone other places for their information, and it's listed here. So you could always click into some of these articles and they could potentially be in your used as other sources. So we really love that. So these are all different ways that you can access your articles, and that's just one search. That's just one search. And what's really nice is like when you're looking through things and you're considering what you might choose, that's just one piece of it. I mean, you could keep on going through it. You can keep on scrolling down and then see if there's something else there using those keywords. And you could do this by looking at the abstract, checking on for full text, and you can do this as long as you want. At a certain point, though, you are going to want to change it up. And so this is when we start talking about different forms of keyword searching. So we started off with looking at AI addiction and mental health. But one of the things that I want everyone to keep in mind is that one of the most powerful ways of changing your research is by adding quote marks. So if I was looking at AI addiction and mental health, and I use quote marks instead of not having quote marks, remember we got about 55,000 results when we did it that first sweep. Now, when I use it with quote marks and I click search, I get 187 results. That's remarkably different. And that's actually okay because a lot of times what you're doing during this process, I mean, our knee-jerk reaction is, oh, wow, I've gotten a lot of results. Therefore, I must be doing the right thing. But the truth is that you are trying to find a sweet spot. And the sweet spot can be found easier with appropriate punctuation and also by thinking about different types of filters. So we already are doing pretty well here. We've added quote marks around AI addiction and mental health, and we have 187 results compared to the 55,000 that we got without the quote marks. The next thing we're going to do is look at different types of filters. So we could always put in that publication date. Again, that's an easy way to get the newest information. But another thing you might want to look at is maybe different source types. Now, most of these are academic. Most of these are being published in the last, have been published in the last, or in these types of places. But you can see we have a couple magazines here. We have a couple of news. I mean, let's see what we look at if we just click on news. If I click on news, that takes my 187 to 2, but check this out. We see shocking majority of Gen Zers would marry AI, think it could replace human connection. That's fascinating. And this came out last year. Next, we have AI is changing relationships, an in-depth look. This came out in 2024. Now we went from 55,000 in that last search to 187 when we put the quote marks. And then instead of clicking peer reviewed, we looked at news, and now we have some articles that are arguably compelling. So that's something that you could consider. Another thing that you might want to look at are the subjects. Now, when we're looking at subjects, you can think of these as tags. When we're thinking about tags, a lot of us are already familiar with this because this is what we do when we are looking at, when we're trying to have more people look at our social media, right? And so because we're looking at more social media and we want people to see our pictures or the fun times that we're having, we'll add words. So the same thing is done by publishers and authors when they are publishing articles. So they're findable. That's the point, accessibility. So say I wanted to look at this, maybe I wanted to look at compulsive behavior, maybe that area of mental illness and AI. So if I wanted to do that, I could look at that. I could look at family psychotherapy, recovery. I could focus on young adults. You know, I could look at a drug if I wanted to. But if I want to look at compulsive behavior, we see that just, again, narrows down my results. It looks like it took away a few, and we could click into this and see what more is there. So we do have these options, and you can see what happens when we make these slight changes just in punctuation and in the filters that we add here. Now, when we're looking at this, we do have other types of things that we could be looking at here in terms of places to search. So we did start with Discover once we narrowed down our topic and opposing viewpoints. And one of the most popular databases to consider is Academic Search Complete. It is a multidisciplinary database, and it contains information about different types of topics that, healthcare, social issues, news, children, food, colors, everything. It's just multidisciplinary. You know, you could look at it if you were an engineering student, you could look at it as a graphic designer, you could look at it if you wanted to be an English major. All of these types of subjects are dealt with here. They have sources in this database. So in this case, it is a little different than start with discover. Say I wanted to look at artificial intelligence this time, but this time I start typing it in and it starts to give me some predictive text, which I like. So this time I'm going to look at all types here, artificial intelligence or AI with periods. Next, I'm going to go ahead and type in mental health. I'll just go ahead and click that. And then I'll type in youth. But maybe I want all the words for youth. Youth, adolescents, young people, teen, young adults, all of these words. Now, these are being pulled together by something called an operator or a Boolean operator. An operator works in this case by telling the computer, giving it commands and telling it what it wants you to do. So when I was saying artificial intelligence or AI and mental health, when I was looking at that earlier, when I said and, or when I click and here, what I'm saying to the computer is, hey, I want all of these words. I want these both, all of these to show up somewhere in my article. That's what I want. I want them in the title. I want them in the subject. I want them in the description. If this article doesn't contain all these words, I don't even want to consider it. That's what and does when you bring together terms with the word and. When you use or, what you're doing is you are saying, which we have here with the youth, adolescents, or young people. When we say or, what we're saying is that you want every type of article that contains those words, but they don't necessarily have to overlap. And then we have something that is a not. And when we're looking at not, what we are saying is that we do not want that word. And so if I had chosen that one research question where we were looking at maybe the way that AI impacted children and adults or versus like a comparison, one of the ways that you can hone in on a specific group, if I said here AI intelligence and mental health, but not youth, well, then I should only be getting articles that focus on age groups that imply we're looking at people outside of that young youth, that young adult, age range. We're going to be looking at how it impacts adults, people who are, not young. And so that not can be very powerful. So in this case, though, we are going to use and with all of them because I do want all of these words. I am going to add my filters below. So we'll go with our tried and true peer reviewed, although you don't need to, and make sure you always check with your teachers about what they want for their research or for what they want for this assignment. And then you can go ahead and put in this publication date of 5 years. But again, check with your teacher on this. Some teachers feel just fine with 10 years. Sometimes I've met teachers who are kind of like very open to more than that. If it's a history or they want to do a comparison throughout the years, the eras. But then I've also worked with instructors who want things to be 2 or 3 years. I mean, very tight, very, very tight. So if that's the case, just make sure you know every teacher has the right to change their mind. You can look at different types of publications here. This is an academic journal if that's what you wanted, a document type. You can even narrow down the pages. But when you're ready, once you have applied your filters, you can click search in a number of areas. And you'll see here we have 231. So that's not bad. 231 results is excellent. Again, especially considering all the things that we want to know here. And in this case, you can start to see as you scroll down, some of these, I mean, I recognize this from the last sweep that we did, but you can also see this cited by 3. Those are starting to pop up around here, cited by 2, cited by 11. We have our access options here as PDF or online full text. So in both of those cases, we could click right to it. If I clicked on this cited by 11, it would show me which options are there. But getting into it, once again, this allows me to see the research. You can see it's 18 pages long. And I still have the same type of ed tech tools to get a citation, to share it, or to send it to myself, to download it, to listen to it, etc. So all of these things are very, very nice. I would actually encourage anybody when they're going through this and looking at their options to look at both Academic Search Complete and start with Discover if you have the time. If you are limited on time, I would say go right to Academic Search Complete, because most likely you're always going to get fewer hits or fewer results because you're looking at one database versus all of the ones that are searched when you look at the A to Z resources. That's the main reason why it's different when you compare. A lot of times I use Start with Discover if I'm looking at something very abstract. The final thing I'm going to show you here in terms of doing research is going into A to Z resources and checking out a specialized database. So a specialized database that or a way to get there would be to look at subjects, scroll through here. We could probably look at information technology as a way to filter the databases. We could most likely look at science and applied sciences because we're talking about mental health. But when we are here, if we are looking at this, let's go to information technology. Let's go to filter databases. We have 12. I have applied science and text source. I have communication and mass media complete. So I'm going to go ahead and look at that. I'm curious. Mass media. If I was doing something for technology, this is a database I would definitely look at, because the way we communicate is definitely communication and technology is tied. And since we're looking at mental illness, and a lot of times the way we show up is part of mental illness, or how we examine it, or how we detect that something might be off, this makes sense that I might want to look in this specialized database. So I'm going to click here. And as you can see, we have something that looks very similar to when we were looking at Academic Search Complete. So let me do this again, artificial intelligence. And we're going to go with mental health. And I'm going to do the exact same one that I did here, this youth or adolescents or young people. But again, I've shown you a couple of different wordings, but you can do any type of words at any point, in fact. And so you can, again, put these peer reviewed here. You can put the dates. But if I go ahead, and I'll just go ahead and put the date here, because your teachers won't always require that you have peer reviewed. If I say the past 5 years of this topic, and then I click search, we have two. We have two. And sometimes that's all we have. We have the proliferation of deep fakes increasingly disturbing. This came out in 2024. And then we have something here that looks like it was written in Arabic, and this studies mental health support for Gen Z. And they're looking at a case study of an Egyptian series called Midterm. All right, right on. So we could look at this. Another thing I want to point out that I failed to earlier, when we're looking at these, if you're interested still in looking at those abstracts, they can be found right here. So if you click on that show more, that's where you'll find those when you're looking at it through underneath that A to Z resources. So yes, that is research. That's research in a nutshell. And this is research when you are looking at the Ivy Tech library site. The Ivy Tech library site has so many little nooks and crannies, and a lot of times people don't know where to get started when they are doing research. And I am here to tell you that you have a few. This opposing viewpoints is where you go to do some brainstorming. Start with Discover is how you look at a lot of databases, especially when you have something that might be a little complicated or you really want to see all the options that are out there. This Academic Search Complete is a multidisciplinary database, just one database versus 134. And then you can get into A to Z resources to find specialized databases, no matter what your topic is. I showed you mass media and communication complete, or communication and mass media complete, but we also have, tech databases. We have education databases. They're so good. And so going back to our presentation and seeing what we had there, When we are going through the steps of research, sometimes it can be very daunting, especially when you are running out of time. But if you go through those steps, I promise you are going to find results. It takes a little bit of patience, but it does, if you're willing to evolve throughout your practice of research, most likely you're going to find what you need. And you can always go to a librarian, which is which is an area where we specialize in, which is when we do research. So today we went through quite a few different steps. And I hope now that you know where to find your information and you know which sources are considered appropriate, especially when we're talking about academics. Identifying databases and resources relevant to your research project. So make sure you're you're looking in places that will aid you. You know, you may not need to look at opposing viewpoints, but it definitely will fill in some gaps if you're still wondering. And, note, we have so many databases, they're going to be suitable just depending on what your need is at the time. And then finally, choosing keywords that represent a research topic. Making sure that you're using the right words when you're looking up your information. A lot of times you can pull those from your thesis or your research question. And then as you do research, you'll just stumble upon others that will inspire you to look up other things. So with that said, thank you again for being here. I'm going to move this little bar here. Thank you for being here for this presentation. If you're on the Indy campus in person, we have our hours posted during the 8 weeks during the academic school year when classes are in session. We are open 6 days a week, Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Friday, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and then on Sunday, we are closed. You are welcome to scan either one of these QR codes, and they will take you to either our library site or the Ivy Tech Indy Campus Tutoring Service, which is free to all students. Thank you for being here today, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.